Is that even better? I don't know. Let's try it. Nah, it's not gonna work. Nothing matters. All right. Wait. I gotta find my coffee. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the heart. Talked about blood. Don't let me forget at the end of class, I need to talk about what we're going to be doing on the quiz. So the heart, it's the whole purpose of the heart is to deliver gases. That's a horrible way to put it. Let me ask a different question. Why are we breathing? Oh, you know what? Go ahead and answer it. Why do we breathe? I'm ready. What, you guys already go back to sleep? Fine. So we breathe. A lot of people say it's to take in oxygen, to get to oxygenate our cells. Okay, that's true, but actually, there's a better reason, and it's to expel carbon dioxide. It's the fact that we want to get rid of carbon dioxide because when we're breaking down the food that we eat, we're producing, like, we need to get rid of the extra carbon that was in our food. So that's all going back to like cellular respiration, Krebs cycle, all of that. And then, so we need to get rid of that carbon dioxide. That's why we're breathing in. So we want to send all the carbon dioxide from our cells or tissues, right? Tissues is just a group of cells. We want to send all that carbon dioxide to the lungs to get rid of it. And then we get rid of it and we take in more oxygen, which we're going to send to the cells. So if you look at the difference between oxygen and carbon dioxide, that's like O2 and that's CO2. The difference between those two letters is just the carbon. So one way to imagine it, it's not entirely accurate, but it's one way to imagine it. The oxygen is coming into our bodies, grabbing the carbon, and then going back out. So we're pulling the oxygen in, it's grabbing carbon wherever it is, and then we're taking the carbon out of our body. So there's a constant exchange between cells that are making the carbon dioxide and our lungs, which are bringing in oxygen. The heart is in the middle, mediating this. And it looks exactly like that. So the heart is in the middle, mediating that. Can you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the heart's in the middle, mediating this. So here's a better way to draw it. What the heart is actually saying is, okay, lungs, give me the blood with oxygen in it, and I'm going to send that oxygen out to the cells. And then it's telling the cells, give me back the blood, and I'll send it out to the lungs. So it's really more like that. Thought I admitted her.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy. And he works for Miss Gus, right?
I think so. He was like the sharp NCOIC.
Yeah.
Is what he was. So yeah, he must work with her.
Hold on, let me shut her off.
Mute.
I'll mute her. Oh, I can't. Ebony. There you go. Thanks. All right, so that's really what it is. So actually, there's two types of blood that's in your body. Your blood exists in two different forms, and it's actually carried in different blood vessels. So you have blood with a lot of oxygen in it, and you have blood with not a lot of oxygen in it. So all the blood that's coming back that's been used up, it doesn't have a lot of oxygen. And all the blood that's right by your lungs that you just breathed in, and that blood went in, that oxygen went into the blood. That's got so we call that. So we have oxygenated blood and we have deoxygenated blood. Or another way to put it is oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood. For example, in our body, we have different blood vessels. So like in my arm, I've got veins. I can see the veins if I look down, right? But there's also arteries that are deeper. The arteries are, in the case of my arm, the arteries are carrying blood with a lot of oxygen in it, oxygenated blood, or oxygen-rich blood, however you want to call it. I'm going to call it oxygenated and deoxygenated. It doesn't mean that deoxygenated has no oxygen in it. It's just the old word, and I still use it. But another word for that is oxygen poor. So there's blood that has a little bit of oxygen, but not a lot. So the arteries are carrying oxygenated blood to feed all my cells with oxygen. And then the veins are bringing deoxygenated blood back to my heart. So if I were to follow my heart, there's a tube that's coming around my shoulder, which you know that name by now, subclavian. You better say subclavian. And then down my arm, and then there's a vein coming back. That's a subclavian vein going right back into my heart, into the vena cava, into my heart. So we're going to learn about the heart. I'm going to draw it out as a box because I'm not a great artist. So that's the heart. Not make that. That's the heart, just a box. And the first thing we're going to do is divide it in half. We're going to divide it in half. Now it's the heart's facing you, right? So this is the right side, and that's the left side. So it's opposite. Oh, she lied to me. That's not a neat pen. Oh, because I'm using the wrong pen. Oh, so that's the right side. You know what sucks is this is all getting recorded. Oh, you know what? That's the right side, and this is the left side. I wrote it in two different colors. Because one side, the right side, only deals with blood that is deoxygenated. Then your book tends to write that in blue. And then the right side only deals with blood, the left side only deals with blood that is oxygenated. Just remember that the heart is facing you in anatomical positions. So the right and the left look a little off, right? But just remember that you can divide the heart in half because this side of the heart is only dealing with deoxygenated blood, blood that does not have a lot of oxygen in it. And this side of the heart only deals with oxygenated. After you're born, those two sides don't mix. So whatever comes into the right side goes out the right side. So now we can divide it again. So now I've got my 4 chambers. So I've got 2 chambers on the right side and 2 chambers on the left side. So the top 2 chambers receive blood, they get blood. So we're going to call those atria. Singular is atrium, and then plural is atria. Not having a great start. So they're both atria, the left atria, the right atria. So we know what they do. The left atrium, the right atrium receive blood, and now we know what kind of blood it receives. So the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood, It's just the receiving department. Left atrium receives oxygenated blood. Again, receiving department. And then we're going to hand that blood off to the ventricles. The ventricles are going to pump that blood out, depending on where it needs to go. So we've got 2 atria and 2 ventricles. And that's our 4 chambers. The 2 atria are receiving blood. They're getting blood from different places, though. Because this is deoxygenated blood. This blood has no oxygen. So it's coming from all of our cells in our body that have used this blood up. It's deoxygenated. So it came from, where did it come from? All your cells or tissues. Cells or tissues, either one. Right? It's all the blood that our cells, it's all the blood that has like the carbon dioxide in it from our cells. And so, but on this side, this is oxygenated. This just came from our lungs. Because it's got lots of oxygen in it. So let's look at the right side. This blood that's going into the right atrium, it came from all of our cells. It's deoxygenated. What the heart needs to do right now is take that deoxygenated blood and it needs to like send it off to the lungs to get oxygenated, and then it'll take it back. So it takes all that deoxygenated blood, it hands it off to the ventricle, and we're going to send it out. Goes out to the lungs. Hey lungs, this is like old blood. Can you swap it out for some good blood? And the lung sends it back to the heart. It's coming in on the other side, but it sends it back to the heart. The heart gets it. Oh, here's some oxygenated blood. Let me give that blood to the ventricles. And the ventricles are the shipping department. So the ventricles send it off to all the cells. And then once all the cells use up all of that oxygen, we send the blood back to the heart again so that the heart can send it out to the lungs, so the lungs can give it back to the heart. Out to the cells, back into the heart, out to the lungs, back into the heart, out to the cells, back into the heart. So that's a circulation. It's leaving one side of the heart, it's coming back to the other side of the heart. That's fine, because the blood is leaving as one thing and it's coming back as another thing. You send it out with oxygen, it comes back to you without oxygen. So you can't go to the same side of the heart. Anyway, there's different blood vessels hooked up, so it's not really that big of a deal. But there's our 4 chambers. 4 chambers of the heart, 4 rooms of the heart. Left atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle. So far, hopefully, so far so good. All right, let's add some stuff in here. First, I'm going to erase some stuff. I don't want too much going on here. All right, I'm going to put some valves in here. Because between rooms, you have to have a door. I'm going to put a valve right there and a valve right there. And how it works is like, it's like that door. So pretend that like the hallway is the atrium and this classroom's a ventricle, right? So the valve works one way. It lets me go in so I can enter. But if I try to go back out into the hallway, I shut the door. Like if all the blood tries to go back into the atrium, it hits the valve and it closes it, and this door only opens one way. So if blood wants to come this way, fine, it opens up. But if all the blood tries to rush out back the other way and go back, they're all gonna like slam up against this door and close it. That's what that's how your valves work. So I kind of drew them I So there's a valve in between your atrium and your ventricles. In fact, I'm going to erase the word. So there's valves in between. So once the blood goes into the ventricle, you're not going back up. Not this way, at least. Right? So you have to leave this way. If you want to leave the ventricle, you've got to go through that door. And again, you're not going back in. All these valves in your body in general, are kind of like one-way doors. You go through it, but you're not going back. And so the heart has 4 chambers and 4 valves. So one way I could talk about these valves is I could talk about these two together, and I can call them atrioventricular valves. So I could say that these, if I want to talk about these together in general, I'll call them AV valves. So I'm not telling you about a specific one, right? But if I wanted to be specific and I wanted to talk about like the left side, I'm going to call that mitral. Mitral valve, or another word you might have heard before is bicuspid. And then this valve here, tricuspid. When you look at it, it's got 3 little cusps, right? So both of these are AV valves, atrioventricular valves, and that's the mitral valve. That's the tricuspid valve, right? So they both prevent blood from going back into the atrium. Sometimes this valve gets jacked up, right? It doesn't work. And so what would happen? It's supposed to close. Maybe sometimes it doesn't like close like good enough, and maybe some blood can go back into here. That means that the more blood I push into here, that I can get into here, that's less blood that I'm going to be able to push out of the heart. Every time the heart contracts, I want to push the blood out of the heart, and I want this door to close all the way. I don't want anything to slip through, like any blood, right? But it happens sometimes. All right, so these two, we call these two semilunar valves. If I wanted to talk about both of them together, right? But if I want to talk about them separately, I'm going to call this one pulmonary valve. Just think about where it's going. From here, where does the blood go? It's going to your lungs. It's going to your lungs, therefore, pulmonary valve. If you remember the heart from lab, this was the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries. That was here. It goes through that valve first. This one is going into the aorta, which we haven't talked about yet. So we're going to call that the aortic valve. So there's the name of your 4 valves. Mitral or bicuspid, tricuspid, pulmonary, and aortic. So at this point, you should have a good idea about the 4 chambers, the 2 atria, the 2 ventricles, and then what these valves are. When you have that idea, we can start filling in where blood goes, because we're going to talk about circulation, because we have 2 types of circulation here. I'm going to erase these. We have 2 types of circulation. We send blood out to the lungs, and that blood comes back from the lungs. Right? So we're sending blood out to the lungs, to the lungs. And then that blood is going to the lungs, becoming oxygenated, and it's coming back in. We call that pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation is just from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. But we're also sending out blood. We're also sending out blood to all of your tissues or cells. Tissues, right? And then it's coming back from the tissues. So it's going out to your system, right? Your blood's taking all of your heart's taking all of that blood with oxygen in it, and it's sending it out to everywhere in your body, up to your brain, down to your toes, your fingers, your arms, your liver, everywhere. And then everywhere, all the cells that get that oxygen are going to give back to the blood carbon dioxide. So then that blood has to go back again to the heart. So sending oxygenated blood off to all of your cells and then getting back the deoxygenated blood, we call that systemic. That's going to your system. And actually, we're talking about both types of circulation here. So we have a pulmonary circulation and we have a systemic circulation. Your heart is sending blood out to the lungs and to the cells. It happens simultaneously, right? The heart's not doing one at a time. Both sides of the heart are pushing blood out. So when you look at like blood coming in, it's coming in on both sides and going out both sides. It's constantly doing that. So blood's constantly coming into the heart, both sides of the heart at the same time, and blood's leaving both sides of the heart at the same time. So you have a constant pulmonary circulation, you have a constant systemic circulation simultaneously. Blood's always moving. Should be always moving. Two different types of blood. Do you feel okay about that? All right. So there we are so far. So then what I'd like to do, I'd like you to do this with me. I'd like to talk about the vessels that, what does blood go through? What's the path that blood takes? And I'm going to introduce some blood vessels at this time, which we've covered. We've talked about the vena cava and the aorta and all that stuff. Right? So I'm just adding that to this. And so just to reiterate, this happens at the same time. Blood is coming into the right atrium at the same time that blood's coming into the left atrium. Right? It doesn't do one side then the other side. But that being said, let's take like one blood cell and follow it on its path through the whole body. So we're going to take a blood cell and follow it through pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. So we're going to go through the whole thing. We're going to start in the right atrium. Doesn't matter where you start because you're going to end up in the same place. It's just that most books start off at the right atrium. So that's where we're going to start off. Color-coded red. No, not color-coded red. Color-coded blue. Thanks to Dr. Khalil, who pay me the pens. Lend me the pens. I say, so right atrium. I'm just going to put that for right. There's the beginning of our deoxygenated blood. Now, where is that blood going to go after it's in the right atrium? Got to go through that valve. So what's that valve? The sooner you learn this, the better, because I'm going to start getting into heart physiology. So you really should have a good understanding of all this. So valve is the, I don't remember. Then it's in the right ventricle. That blood is now in the right ventricle. Got to go through another valve. At this point, it's all pulmonary. So it's going through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk. I'm just going to put P and abbreviate it. The pulmonary trunk, now we're on the outside of the heart. The blood's left the heart. Pulmonary trunk is going to split and go right and left. At that point, it's splitting to go to the lungs on both sides. So I'm going to put pulmonary arteries. It divides more and more, but for now, we're going to leave it. Pulmonary arteries are going to become like whatever, eventually capillaries, right? And then the lungs. So now this blood is at the lungs. So at the lungs, it's not going to be deoxygenated anymore. We're going to take all that carbon dioxide and put it into the lungs so that you can breathe it out. And then instead, we're going to kick out the carbon dioxide and we're going to take in oxygen. Now this blood's going to become oxygenated. And they're going to come back to the heart through pulmonary veins. So, normally, you're going to see arteries as red and veins as blue. But it's not about the type of blood that's in it. An artery is anything going away from the heart. So they both start with A. The artery away. Arteries traveling away from the heart. Veins are coming toward the heart. So that's how we call it a vein versus an artery. So in this case, it's reversed. Right? This is deoxygenated blood inside of an artery. And this is oxygenated blood inside of a vein. But it just came from the lungs. It's got to be oxygenated. So pulmonary veins. Those pulmonary veins are all coming back from the lungs into the left side. The left. I forgot the name of the chamber. Can you believe that? Atria. Little simple words, just how far further down can I go? I'm close to the end. Left atrium. I'm going to continue up there probably. Left atrium through this valve. Because most people call it mitral valve, not bicuspid. Not that bicuspid's not fun, it is, but I'm just saying. So, let's continue. So the reason I'm writing this down, I want you to write it. I mean, you'd be best served writing it down because you're going to have to write it down later. That's how you learn it. So, mitral valve. We're on the left side. Left ventricle. So from mitral valve into the left ventricle. And then out of the left ventricle, through the aortic valve. That word aortic is going to tell you the vessel that's next. Aortic sounds like aorta. So it's going into the aorta, that big red thing that's coming out of the heart and like arching. So we're not going to talk about which ones in particular, but the aorta becomes a whole bunch of arteries. And if you remember the heart, there was those three arteries coming up. You know, they look like something like that, and then there's another one, and then there was another one, right? Brachiocephalic, whatever, carotid, subclavian. But also this whole aorta comes down. So the aorta is like coming up here, and then it's coming down, and all these other arteries are coming off of it, feeding my stomach and my kidneys, and then it's going to split down my legs, right? So that the aorta becomes everything. It becomes all the arteries. So I'm just going to write arteries. And then I'm not going to put anything after that. You know, there are there's capillaries and medarterials, whatever. We'll talk about that later. But arteries, and then here, I'm just going to I'll put tissues instead of cells. So we're making a trade here. This is the blood, the blood coming from the heart to all of your cells, aka tissues, and now back to the heart again. Now I'm changing the color again. Because now it's deoxygenated. So it's got to come back to the heart. So all the veins are going to all converge into one of two very large veins that you know about. Vena cava. So the inferior and superior vena cava. Right. And then from there, finally, we are back to the beginning. So I color-coded the type of blood that is in each of these vessels. Wow, 9:20. We've only been in here. We've only been in here for a half hour. I'm fine with it. I'm walking around and I've got a little bit of coffee left. This is color-coded. If I wanted to break it up by like pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation, I'll show you how I do that. So pulmonary circulation is leaving the heart and going to the lungs. So it's going to leave the heart right around here. Now, from here, it's going to the lungs. Go to the lungs, back to the heart. So right about here. So it's leaving the lungs, it's coming back to the heart. And then at some point, it's going to leave the heart. So I'll put right there. Now it's going to all the... So this right here, leaving the heart, going to all the tissues, and coming back to the heart. Leaving the heart, going to the lungs, coming back to the heart again. Maybe I should have done that. Regretting that decision. I feel like I just confused things. You can forget the last 30 seconds. But this is covering pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. And if I don't ask you that on the quiz, I'll end up probably asking you on the exam too. And it's not a difficult, well, it is difficult, but it's memorization, right? And there's lots of, just want to make sure I don't have anything. There's lots of videos that do this. I like Crash Course, Amoeba Sisters, a lot of people like them. Khan Academy, if you want to go a little more dry, but really good, like slower. Because like Crash Course, sometimes Hank's just like blowing through the material. Khan Academy goes slower, and it draws it all out. They're really quite good in my opinion. Did I stop recording? No, it is being recorded. So, yeah, I would, if you understand this, if you understand where blood's going in the heart, then you're going to have a much easier time with some of the stuff that we're going to discuss probably in detail next class, right? On Wednesday, I'm going to hit you with physiology, right? And so it's just that, and the other reason that you need to know this, because if there's any chapter that you're going to see again in nursing school, like any subject, it's going to be, this will be the first one, right? The heart will come back to you in nursing school, I promise, and they're not going to stop to spend a lot of time on it. Heart, kidneys, renal function, that type of, all of it is in nursing school, but like this really will, maybe not directly, like maybe they're not going to say, well, what's this valve here, right? They're not going to say that. They're going to talk about heart function a lot. And if you understand the anatomy of the heart and where everything is, it's going to make all the other stuff so much easier. And you don't have time in nursing school to start pulling out my old lectures. I mean, really, you don't have time for that, because they're shoving stuff down your throat, and that's it. You don't have time. So learn it now, and really internalize this information. So I'm going to erase this so I can actually project a photo of an actual heart. But do you have any questions or anything? Out of coffee already. It's not even 9:30. Okay. I wanted to start that off before I show you what the heart actually looks like, because in my opinion, it's a confusing organ. It takes a little while for it to make sense, because things come in through the top, but then they also exit through the top. They like go to the bottom, like it'll go down to the ventricle, but then it loops back around and comes back up through the top. And it just looks weird. Things are coming in at weird places and leaving at weird places. Okay, there's one word on here that's rather important, so I'm going to write it down. And that word is mediastinum or mediastinum. That is the cavity that the heart's sitting in. So there it is right there. Or this is a transverse cut. Wait. Yeah. I have to make sure myself. That's a transverse cut, right? So it's sitting in a space, and that word mediastinal or mediastinum is used in other words. So it's good to know, associate that word with heart or maybe thorax. Yeah. So there's a lungs are right next to it. Here you can see the superior. So like here's your jugular veins, for example. Jugular vein, brachiocephalic vein. Here's the superior vena cava. Right, so the blood's going right there into the right atrium. So you can kind of see some of these blood vessels, or here's blood leaving. Left ventricle, up through the aortic valve, into the aorta, and then we're gonna although it loops around, we're going to come up right up here, back up the neck, because I came down the neck. Carotid artery. So there it is in the right ventricle, and it kind of just comes up like that, and that's headed up, or even splits, right? Because it's going up both of your carotids up to your head. Sorry, but anyway, mediastinum. Suck. That's an actual heart, right? Not very a little difficult. All right. Let me show you. Let's get to the actual heart. There's the back side of the heart. We'll come back to that. Let's look at the front side. All right, there we go. Here's the front side of the heart with lots of words. This is a coronal section or a frontal section. So the front part's been cut off so that you can look into it. And actually, I am going to write on this. So let's locate the 4 chambers. So right ventricle, not too difficult. There's your right ventricle. No. Right atrium, exactly what I meant. Here's your right atrium. I didn't mark, there's the valve. I didn't mark the valve. Here's the right ventricle. Right about like that. This is the right ventricle. Let's look at the left atrium, the left ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. So there's our 4 chambers. Let's look at our 4 valves. Here's 2. These are, since they're in between the atrium and the ventricle, they're AV valves. So there is my, as it's marked, tricuspid valve. I'll lose that pen. And there's the mitral valve. So right here, there's 2 valves. Notice, notice that there's these little stringy things attached to the valve. So on one end, it's attached to the valve, and on the other end, it's attached like to the ventricle. So there's like these muscles, called papillary muscles, that they're attached to. You would think that these strings are pulling the valve open. It's the opposite. They're not. These strings are to prevent, you don't want that valve to swing in the other direction. You don't want it to do that. Right, so those strings are preventing this valve. See, right now you can see, I'm going to kind of outline the valve. The valve's right here. Those strings are preventing that valve from swinging into the other side. So you want it to close like straight, right? You don't want it to go like that. So it opens like that. You just want it to be like that. That's what these cords, these are cords. They're like tendinous cords. They're cords made out of like tendon material. Chordae tendineae, that's lab, so forget about it for now. But just what do they do? That's what's important, right? They're preventing that valve from swinging, both of them, right? These are preventing this valve from swinging back into the other side. So right now they're loose. It doesn't look like that in the photo, but these cords are like really loose and they're just hanging there, right? Once this closes, then these cords will be tight. So we've got 2 valves so far. Tricuspid, mitral valve. Here's our other 2 valves. So the blood comes in here. comes in like this, kind of goes up and out this way. There's our pulmonary valve. It looks different, right? But it's another valve. It's a one-way valve. So the blood's coming in here. Here it is. Through the tricuspid valve, into the ventricle, and then out through the pulmonary valve. And headed towards the lungs. This is all your veins, your jugular veins, the veins in your arms, they're all going to converge into that vena cava. Come into your heart, through the atrium, through the valve, through the ventricle, out to the lungs, both directions. Here's your other. So blood's going to come back in from the lungs. There we are, inside of the left atrium. Going to come through the mitral valve and then kind of loop around on its way out, aortic valve. So we're going to have to go behind this vessel right here. So we're going back here through the aortic valve. And there it is. And from there, we can go all these different directions. Or you can keep going. So through the aortic valve, kind of going behind this pulmonary trunk here, into the aorta. These are going, that's going around your shoulder and up your neck. That's going up your neck, that's going around your shoulder. So arms and neck, like arms and head. And then this is coming behind the heart. And here it is at the bottom. That's going to go feed everything. From here, it's going to branch off. Renal arteries, hepatic arteries, gastric artery, whatever artery, intestinal, like that. Right? So feeding your whole body, coming back from your whole body. So let me erase dots. So on here, you should be able to, at this point, make out all four chambers, right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. You should be able to make out all four valves. Tricuspid, mitral, pulmonary, aortic. So that's where you should be at this point. You should be able to recognize those things. And that's what we're doing in lab. Oh, hey, I gotta go get a charger. Hold on 1 second. Did I make it? I made it. Wow. My laptop is like from 2016. Surprised it didn't shut off. All right. 4 valves, 4 chambers. You should look at this heart and be able to find all those without looking at the pointer. And again, this is just lab, right? But it's important you know it for lecture. We added some new stuff. You know what these do, these cords. They're not pulling the valves open. They're preventing them from prolapsing or going into the atrium. Let's look at some of the other vessels. We've already discussed them actually. So, oxygenated blood out through the aorta. That's how oxygenated blood leaves the heart. Goes to the cells. Coming back through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, both into here. So this is systemic circulation. Out through the aorta, that's going to everywhere in your body, all your cells. From here, oxygenated blood is going to be delivered to my brain and to my feet and everywhere in between. This is the return blood. If it's coming from below the heart, right? So this is like from my renal veins, my pelvis, my feet, all those veins are converging here. And all the veins above my heart, arteries like subclavian from my shoulders and my arms, jugulars from my head, they're all coming into here. So this is blood out to all of your cells. This is blood back in from all of your cells. That's systemic circulation. So you should be able to point out the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. And you should, of course, know what the aorta is. So let's talk about the other side. Pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries. Oh, wait, see it. Make a sharper curve. There's my pulmonary arteries. It's weird because this artery is slipping behind. And remember, it's blue, but we're still calling it an artery because it's going away from the heart. So there's my pulmonary arteries. That's going to the left side, the left lungs. That's going to the right lungs. And now, coming back from the lungs, two places. There's two pulmonary veins on one side, and there's two pulmonary veins on the other side. All four are going into here. So if we were, like right now, you can't see where this is going, but it's behind, it's on the back side of the heart. And it's, actually, let me erase this. It's going like this. Right there. Same thing here. So you've got two openings here, and what you cannot see is that there's two openings here. So there's four openings there. But deoxygenated blood out to the lungs. So this is out to the left lung, back from the left lung. Out to the right lung, back from the right lung. That's pulmonary circulation. It's just blood going to the lungs and coming back. So although you might not get it all now, you have the majority of this slide. I mean, once you get all that, you'll know the majority of this slide. There's a lot of words written on both sides, but most of these you actually know it. And you will know it by the end of lab anyway, so yeah. Notice something. This is muscle. All of this is muscle. Kind of looks like muscle, right? So we call this, by the way, myocardium. Hoping it'd be labeled for me. Muscle. So myocardium. The muscle of the heart is myocardium. There's actually three layers to this. So there's like a white line. You see like the lining here? There's like this white line right there. You can see it again right here. That white line, we call it endo. Endo meaning inside. Endocardium. And then there's a white line right here on the outside of the heart. That little white line surrounding the heart. We call that epicardium, EPI. So there's actually 3 layers: epicardium, myocardium, endocardium. So if you were to like stick a finger in the heart and like touch the inside wall of the atrium or ventricle, you'd be touching endocardium. So this is that was myocardium. Well, I lost it. Can I get it back? Of course not. And it's too big. The best part is that it's all recorded. Wow, this thing is going to drive me crazy. This might be time for a break. Unbelievable. All right. Any questions while I'm trying to get this straight? Wait, I almost got it. All right, let me just full screen the slide. All right. My question that I was trying to get at is that if you look at the myocardium here, it's a lot thinner than the myocardium on that side. So this wall on the right side is thinner than the muscle here on the left side. So I wanted to ask you why you think that that might be. And you don't have to answer. You could think of it to yourself if you want. But just think about this. Think about what this ventricle does, the left ventricle, versus the right ventricle. Where is the left ventricle sending blood to? Everywhere. Your pinky toe, your pinky finger, and your brain. Everywhere. Where's the right side sending blood to? The lungs. How long of a trip is that? My heart's here, my lungs are here. Next door and back. Easy trip. You don't need to like push a lot of pressure onto that, right? So this right ventricle, I'm not saying it's not working. It doesn't have a hard job. It's a college teacher. This side is sending blood all the way down to your feet, and think about this. It's pumping blood all the way down to your toes and the return trip. There's no heart in your toes. How are you getting all that blood from your toes back up to your heart while you're standing, walking around, things like that, right? That's a big task, to pump blood all the way to your feet and pump blood all the way back up. So it's stronger, right? There's a bigger implication to things happening on the left side than the right side. You notice that mitral valve and tricuspid, you're not going to hear, like in the future, you're not going to hear a whole lot of people talking about a bad tricuspid valve, although it happens. Most of the time, it's the mitral valve. because the implications are more, because this blood's going everywhere. Not that this side's not important. It is. I mean, it's your heart. Your heart's your heart, right? You have a heart attack and it affects cells that are here. That sucks, right? Any heart attack sucks. But what's this chamber, what's the right ventricle actually doing? It's kind of sitting around waiting for blood to fill it. And even when it does give it to the ventricle, it's not going very far. Have a heart attack here and it affects the cells that are here, that's a lot worse. This is going everywhere in your body. This is giving oxygenated blood to your whole body. The implications are so much worse. If I had to pick what part of my heart is going to get, because when you starve cells in your heart, because that's what's happening in a heart attack, it's called a myocardial infarction. So you're messing with the myocardium. Those cells aren't going to grow back. So when you starve them of oxygen and those cells die, they're not coming back. So where it is can matter. That's one of the factors. When we talk about how healthy the heart is, we're talking about things like ejection fraction, like how much your heart is pushing out. We're always talking about this. How much blood is that ventricle pushing out of the body? Every time it beats, how much blood's getting ejected. So, anyway, I think we've covered this slide. I think we're about time for a break, aren't we? No. All right, 5 more minutes. I'm not going to cover some very serious material, but let's just look at some other slides. You see how much, like this was a real heart. You see how difficult that is? And even for me, I have a difficult time. I wouldn't be able to make this cut. I have a hard time. I guess if I really spent time on it, maybe I would do it, but I have a hard time isolating the ventricles. This is just showing you what I was talking about, right? These are the chordae tendineae, and that's more of a lab word, but they're loose when the valves open. When the valves close, they're tight, right? They're preventing that valve from opening further, or like coming further into the atrium. That's just showing you all 4 valves. It doesn't look like it from the previous picture, but they're all kind of lined up, and there's like dense connective tissue surrounding them. That's not something that I'm gonna like test you on, but I'm just kind of showing you. This might help you. It never helps me. I hate slides like this, but this is showing you pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, and it's also showing you oxygenated versus deoxygenated blood, which they're calling here, which is a better way to call it, oxygen-rich blood. That's a more accurate term, oxygen-poor blood. Because there is oxygen in all of your blood. It's just some of your blood has more and some of it has less. This right here, that's what we wrote up on the board. Well, I wrote up on the board. And actually, we started in the same place. Come to think of it, I could have just put this one on there. But I like the other one better because I felt like it covered more things. But same thing, right? Right atrium, tricuspid ventricle, pulmonary valve. Then I wrote pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries. Well, actually, this is, that's it right there. That's a recap. You know, if you want to screenshot that one also. But it says the same thing that I wrote down, you know, either way. But this is showing you the circulation of blood. But you should know which of these, like if I say left ventricle, you should know what type of blood is in it. Oxygenated or deoxygenated. Or I should say oxygen-rich or oxygen-poor blood. Which type? Right? Tricuspid valve, what kind of blood passes through that? You should know. I'm going to talk about this one. I guess I'll talk about it now. And then I'm going to leave. We're going to take a break after I talk about this last type of circulation. So we have 3 types of circulation. We've talked about 2 of them. We talked about systemic circulation. That's when blood goes from the heart to the body and back to the heart again. So from the heart to everywhere, all your systems, and back to your heart. We also talked about pulmonary circulation. That's when blood goes to your lungs and back to the heart again. So from the heart to the lungs, back to the heart. We're going to talk about a 3rd type and the last type. Coronary circulation. The heart has to give itself blood, like oxygen. The myocardium is muscle, and it needs oxygen, and it produces carbon dioxide. So you would think that the heart might why don't we just take some of the blood from the inside of the heart and use that? No, your heart treats itself just like every other organ. So the heart is going to send blood out. Here's the blood coming out into the aorta. From the aorta, this is going to go everywhere, right? Up to around your shoulders, up to your brain, your head, around the shoulder. But look right there. Right here is the one of the coronary arteries. Here's the other one right here. So those are both tapping off of the aorta. And that's feeding the heart itself with blood. This is where the heart attacks happen. Right? Depends on which of these vessels gets clogged up. This is not going to get clogged up. That's not going to get clogged up. Those are pretty big vessels. It's these little tiny ones that get clogged up. And where it happens matters, right? If you get a clog right there, or here, that's worse. You get a clog right here, they call it like the widowmaker, right? You're depriving this side of your heart with oxygen. If you get your clog right there, it's fine. It's not fine, but worse things can happen. But anyway, this is all feeding the heart with blood. Now I'm just going to show you the one going back. Right, so these are called coronary arteries. I'm not going to make you learn all of these, but you should know at least that one. Coronary artery coming off of the aorta. And then this is, let's see if this works. Yes, that's the return. This is all the veins going back. So all these veins that are feeding the heart muscle have to come back to the heart, and they're all going to converge into this one little spot right here called the coronary sinus. So if you were to look in, now again, this is for lab. If you look inside of the right atrium, you'll see the little opening. Like you're looking in the right atrium, you'll see that little opening right there. And that's all the blood coming back in. So this is the heart, blood going from the heart to the heart and back to the heart. That's coronary circulation. All right, we're going to take a break. I'm going to stop recording. I think I'm going to make this like a 2-part deal.